Hello, Jared. Welcome to 321 No Kidding.
How's it going? Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to have you, except for you're in a warmer place than me, so I'm a little jealous. It's snowing today.
Southern California is very spoiled living here. I mean, you do have to sit through lots of traffic, but yeah, I do live in Los Angeles County and San Dimas, Laverne to be specific, for anybody that knows where that is. Pomona, people probably know Pomona because there's a fair every year. That's where I live.
The West Coast is probably my second biggest audience other than the town I live in.
Really? Cool.
There's Oregon and San Jose are two of my biggest cities. So thank you to my listeners out there. I have no idea who they are. They're not relatives or anything.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah, I'm wondering who's listening to my podcast too.
So we connected in a Facebook room, podcasting.
Yes.
Yeah. And you brought up the topic of mental illness. So I'm hoping you'll share, anything like personal, if you want to share like your work, talk about your podcast, any of that.
Yeah.
We'll dive in. And then I'd love for you to share your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's probably a little bit easier to go a little bit back, like linear, like backwards to now, and kind of a summary because it is all kind of connected. I did start a podcast 2 years ago on mental illness and my kind of Christianity and faith belief and kind of how those two things have influenced me, because when you kind of break them both apart, they're like huge subjects. Spirituality and faith is huge for lots of people. And then so is obviously mental health. I definitely have probably been bipolar my whole life, but I'm 35 now. Childhood for me was like really good in a lot of ways and then really bad in a lot of ways. A lot of it was like nature and nurture mixed together, but I had a very loving mom, not a very good dad, lots of dad issues. As far as addiction, my dad was very into alcohol, was very angry, yelled, was like very verbally abusive. So both me and my older sister have struggled kind of later on in our adult life with, just instability and anxiety and depression. And I do think looking back at that, as you get older, you reflect on your childhood, right? And you're like, oh, wow, that was really unhealthy. And I think I don't have kids. My sister has 3 boys now. And I think a lot of the yelling and the anger just really created a lot of fear in me. And then my mom was a flight attendant, which she loved her job and got to travel the world. She's retired now. So that was cool, but she left a lot. So she kind of left and then left us with our dad and hated our dad. But it was a very bipolar childhood. And I don't want to say my dad was all negative because he did do a lot of things right too. I played hockey for 6 years, competitive ice hockey, got to travel all over Colorado. And he really sacrificed a lot for me with that. But when I was 21, I went away to college and I went to this very religious place and school. So I kind of had a lot of hyper spirituality going on. And I had a panic attack one night when I was 21. And it was, if you've ever had a panic attack and you've never experienced it before, it's just this crazy sensation where you think you're going to die. For me, it led to me losing sleep. So I didn't sleep for a night, and then it went to 2 nights, and then it went to 7 nights. So I didn't sleep for a week. So I was in this manic so I started having suicidal thoughts. I felt condemnation is the spiritual term, but just your mind is, when you don't sleep for a day, you feel a little bit off, let alone 7 days. So my parents had moved to California while I was in Kansas City, is where this had originally happened. I came home to be with my family. At this point in time, my parents were still together. And so my mom and my dad kind of were my doctors, I guess. I did go see a doctor and everyone was like, you just need to sleep, man. That's what's going on. So medication came into play. I ended up really not sleeping for a month. I mean, it was like a whole month-long thing. I finally kind of calmed down. And so anyway, I had this like 6-month drinking. I was trying to use other stuff to help me sleep, not really drugs. Fortunately for me, drugs has never really been like a thing. Alcohol, kind of. I snapped out of it. I kind of just weaned myself off of all the medicine. I was like, oh, that was just, me being 21, and I don't think I'm bipolar. And I don't think anybody, when you first hear any kind of diagnosis, you're just like, yeah, that's me. I'm great now. You don't really accept it. You kind of like run away from that. So I went back to Kansas City, and then it happened again, like exactly a year later. Same thing. I just couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. I was like, okay, maybe something's like now really wrong with me. So then I managed to be fine for about 4 years on a lot of medication. But looking back in hindsight, it was like too much meds, if that makes sense, which it's very possible in the psychiatric world to like be over medicated from doctors and you just don't know it. And so this led to me getting off of all of that stuff because I kind of was just like a zombie. I don't know really how I like function, but I was able to. Fortunately for me, I've always been surrounded by lots of really good people and friends and support. And that's definitely, I think, helped. But I know I went about the getting off the meds in a very like not good way. You never should just get off medication on your own,
I think
So
they
I don't
tell
know.
us that.
What'd you say?
I think doctors tell us that.
Yeah, of course. And it's definitely hard. It's definitely complicated, I think, because the brain is complicated. Medicine, nobody knows everything. And you kind of unfortunately you're kind of an experiment. It's not some, deep secret Russian experiment, but like not Stranger Things or something, but like the doctor really can only just kind of try something and see how you respond. That's really about it. Like so the doctor that I had that had over medicated me, I think he was just afraid that I was going to like lose my mind if I, had less medicine or something. So he just wasn't a good doctor. I got off all of that stuff, and then kind of the like worst time of my life happened. I was 27, and I think because I had gotten off all of this medication, I kind of hit that wall again. But this time around, I was like severely suicidal, and I went to the hospital for the first time. I had never been hospitalized in those earlier times. So it led me to this really bad, like 8 months. I was living with just my mom. I finally like left Kansas City for good after being there for 8 years. And my sister had just had her like first baby. But third time around, I was very suicidal, which I had never really experienced that. If you've ever been suicidal, which there's a lot of people out there, I just got very stuck in my head with thinking, just not really thinking there was a way out, like I can't get these thoughts out of my head. So it was really bad. So I had a couple of not super severe suicide attempts, trying to like kind of overdose with a little bit of medication. But, once it happened the first time, everyone was very scared. So I was in and out of the hospital. And then probably at about the 8-month mark, my mom had like left me alone because she had to go to work as a flight attendant. She had taken a lot of time off. She was like, I think you're okay being alone, but it was hard. I didn't really have a lot of friends. I wasn't really around a lot of people. Yeah, I tried to overdose with like all of the meds that I had, which was probably like 100 pills.
Nice.
And, I mean, lithium, Seroquel, Lamictal. I mean, you take like the previous attempt that I had, I took like 10 of something, and that made me, I had to get rushed to the emergency room, and I had to drink charcoal to like, that's how you get it out of your system. And so this was very severe. I passed out. Luckily, I knew my mom was coming home. So kind of like took all the pills at like 6 p.m. She was supposed to come home at like 10 o'clock. So she knew something was wrong. She called me. I didn't answer. She's speeding home. And obviously, if she hadn't come home, I definitely would have died. But because she was able to get there, I ended up in a coma. So I was in a coma for 3 days, just like Jesus. No, I'm just kidding. And
well, I was just thinking you were catching up on all that sleep you missed.
Yeah, exactly.
This version of the story.
Yeah. So I'm in a coma. My mom is texting like everyone we know, pray for Jared. My sister comes. My dad did come to see me, and then about 5 of my friends from the Midwest, and my one friend Zach, who was in Rochester. He had just moved to upstate New York, become a pastor up there. He flies in, so like all my friends come and see me, and then through like a friend of a friend, this church in Pomona, California, which I had visited once. They all just prayed. It was like a 4-hour like prayer session. And the morning they prayed for like from like 8 to 12. And then like a couple hours later, I came out of the coma like that afternoon, the same day that everybody was,
wow,
praying. So definitely a miracle. Definitely the most intense thing I've ever experienced. I mean, by far in my entire life. So that kind of was really the start of, I ended up going to the hospital for 5 months, like 2 different kind of psych places. And I ended up just getting really, really good treatment. So kind of the first thing that needed to really change was really just trying to get the medicine right. And I don't know, I just had a really good doctor in there, and he's like, oh, I can't believe you ever tried this. Let's see how this works. And he ended up just kind of, again, a little bit of guesswork. They're like, you don't know, right? So he guessed right. And
Jared, I want to hear a lot about the wellness chapter, but can we back up? I have a couple of notes of things I want to ask.
Yeah.
They're kind of random. One is, what's the name of your podcast for my people who might want to find you?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's called Louder Now, but the best way to probably find it is just to type in Louder Now, Jared Diehl, Diehl. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. It is on Google. Those are probably like the 3 main ones. And I think maybe if you have like Castbox, but yeah, that's the podcast for sure.
Okay. Well, I wrote down my notes in order as you said things. Then you said these attacks happened when you went. Well, I have another question first.
Yeah.
Church. You keep going back to church. Can you tell me what your childhood church was? Like, were you guys going to church regularly? What did really like in your life when you were growing up?
Very just church all the time, very non-denominational, very like charismatic, which is, definitely lots of pros and cons to that kind of, spirituality and approach to the Bible. But yeah, definitely, honestly, answer the question, like evangelical, like believing the Bible, like believing scripture is, inspired by God, believing like Jesus died on the cross, just kind of the bullet points of like, yeah, I'm like a Christian, and I'm following this pretty seriously. My parents were actually pastors when we were like really little, and that didn't last very long. My mom has always had this very unique, just like, she's written a couple of books on faith, and she's traveled the world, like literally. My dad was a flight attendant actually with my mom, and that they did that for the first like 10 years of our life. But yeah, my mom has always had more of a like just preaching the gospel like wherever she goes and meeting people, and like she's just full of like stories of, I had a dream that this guy wearing a red shirt was on the airplane, and then I met him the next day, and then I prayed with him, and I led him to Jesus. And just this very like, wow, you're actually like living your faith out in what you're doing, in quote unquote the world, So I had a lot of influence. But then, yeah, when I went to the Bible college time, things definitely got kind of more evolved and more just intense. And, you know, there's a lot I could say on the subject because it definitely has done a lot of good, but in the realm of like dealing with kind of the biology and kind of the science behind the breakdown where it's complicated, it was definitely kind of a hindrance for a while. I think I didn't really fully embrace the bipolar side of things until I had 5 months in the hospital of serious, you know, reflection and like soul searching. And that's where a lot of that acceptance kind of took place. So.
Okay. Thank you. And then I just want to clarify, because you said the breakdowns, the way you described them, if I caught the timeline right, they were both when you got to Kansas City, which I lived there for 4 years and I have a great affinity for KC.
Yeah, I noticed your Chiefs thing when we were like, and I can't remember if I asked you about that, but I noticed your Chiefs on your Facebook and I was like, oh man, that's cool.
Yeah. I think KC is one of the most beautiful places in the world. So I just wanted to clarify, it had nothing to do with KC, even though the time was KC. So I was kind of wondering, was there an incident though? That was the only thing I could pick up in your story. Was there a relationship? Was it the stress of the school? That just stuck out to me as you were talking.
For sure. Yeah, there was, it was a very, very unique place and still is. I mean, the International House of Prayer, Kansas City, Mike Bickle, if you Google all of that, you're probably going to find a lot of like, this place is a cult, you know, very, very close friendships with people. I became very close with my friend, Zach. He was older. We lived together. He was like a mentor. I definitely think I brought a lot of like pain and brokenness into that time in my life because I was so young. You know, it was the first thing I did after high school. I kind of just broke away from all of my friends that stayed in Colorado. Yeah, there was a girl I dated right when I moved there. That ended really badly. So I know that was kind of a wound. And it took me a while to kind of get over that. And then Zach got married. And so we lived together, and kind of the time when he started like dating his wife, we kind of like naturally just didn't spend as much time together. You know, you're just like, bro, you know, bros before wives. No. And that naturally, that I do remember the summer before I got to October, the fall, being very depressed and like lonely. So it was a combination of, I think, relationships changing, but the part that I left out, which I shouldn't leave this part out, was it was a 24/7 place and I was staying up all night. So my schedule was like the graveyard shift. So the schedule would be, we would sleep, we would do the prayer shift from like 12 to 6. So whether you're praying or whether you're staying up all night playing video games, you're just not meant to be up all night.
Correct.
So I did that for 3 years without a break, and not really like taking good care of myself, like, you know, not exercising, eating whatever. So I think physiologically, the stress of that mixed with kind of these other like relational things, I think just triggered something in me to kind of like spiral into. So sorry I left that part out, but I think the night watch element contributed to like most of it, you know, that I stayed up all night.
Was the video game, I just recently interviewed someone who told me about his college video game and he labeled it an addiction. Was that a big part of your overnights or was it casual? I'm just.
Oh, video games?
Yeah.
Oh no, that was a joke. Sorry.
Okay.
I was saying whether you're playing video games
all right,
or praying, the act of just being up all night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as far as addiction goes, like I definitely at a young age got into like pornography. And I think for any kid that gets exposed to that young, which unfortunately is it's probably like 1,000 times worse now than it was when, you know, my dad was looking at porn on our like family gateway dial-up modem, and I saw him do that, which, also did something to me of like, wow, here's my dad who's supposed to be helping me, like, probably not partake in this behavior. But I had, we went to church, but I also had friends at school. So I saw my first Playboy when I was like 10 at like a friend's house. His dad had them all like stacked up in the, so that behavior definitely stayed with me even when I was in Bible college. And I think that worsened the amount of like, guilt and kind of shame in partaking in that, especially in an environment of like trying to like live right before God.
I'm seeing such a big struggle just in those two things. They're so contradictory. Like, I get nervous, honestly, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I've had those conversations because I didn't have any faith or spirituality up until the last few years in my recovery. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't understand how guys that I was involved with that had religion or whatever, how they could be involved in sex or dirty things. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around that. Like, well, what are your boundaries? Like, since you're a God kind of guy, like, what are your boundaries? Like, I just couldn't wrap my head around that. So that's why I have a mental disconnect. Like, it's just my own beliefs or perception.
For sure. Well, yeah, it is a huge subject because I think sexuality, and especially with addiction, I mean, it's just the challenge is always, I mean, I think the church and Christianity treats it as this thing of like, it's shameful to even talk about it at church, which kind of is a problem within the problem of like, well, we should be able to talk about it because the problem is that it's a secret. And you're like, I think one of your interviews with someone that I was listening to about the gambling, it's like you live this like double life, right? You're like, oh, I'm showing up for church and I'm this well put together person in front of everyone. And then when I'm alone and I'm feeling like lonely, I'm looking at porn and I'm like doing all this, I'm talking to girls and I'm trying to like have sex and you're living like two lives. So I've definitely dealt with that for the whole time that I've been bipolar. So that's definitely been a contributing like thing. Fortunately, I haven't gone down the road of really dealing with like drugs very much or even alcohol. It's more been kind of that. So
thank you for being so honest.
Yeah, for sure.
Now we get to flip the script. So you're
absolutely
involved in the hospital for 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I'm very curious about bipolar in general.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've done too much homework almost. So there's people in my life. There's two very specific that have been diagnosed with bipolar. And I'm a very black and white and like, you need to take action, like a no excuses kind of person. And there's a lot of resistance around those diagnoses with me because to me, it seems very simple to be able to do the thing, right? And I'm not saying I'm not empathetic. I just don't understand sometimes. My counselor's working on that with me. But then I've done like research and reading. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Amen, but he's a brain doctor.
Yeah, I just ordered one of his books literally yesterday because I
Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, maybe?
Yeah, I've heard of him. He's actually lives here in like Orange County. So if I have $3,000 lying around, I'll go get a brain scan.
I can't wait until I can afford to go. I'm going to go. What I actually wish was I had a brain scan of while I was gambling and drinking and partying and living my old life. I really wish I could have a before and after, but I'm so glad that you're getting that book and we'll have to follow up and chat about your perception, because when he gets into the science of all these diagnoses compared to what he says, it's just very interesting. It makes me wonder, like you said, that the doctors are only as good as the trial and error because each patient's metabolism, body, all of that's different. So it's never going to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've had to kind of I think in recovery, you have to like try to just, I mean, it's like a principle in life too, like, you know, try to just control what you can control, because there's obviously elements to your own mind and your body and your spirituality that you're in the world and like people around you that you're not in control of, but you are in control of a lot. And I think science kind of shows us that. For unfortunately, I think with doctors, like if you're in like a hospital setting or you have a breakdown, like there's like a small window of time that they have to try to like fix you. So you're not going to get the full treatment when you're like 5150 in a psych place. Even when you meet with the doctor regularly, like outside of a hospital, they only have so much time with you too. And most of the time, from my experience, it's really just kind of all about medicine. So it's just all about medication. It's not really about anything else. It's not like, do you exercise? Do you have friends? Do you like kind of like your job? Because those things now, obviously with so much information that we have on, taking control of your thoughts and mindfulness and meditation, there's obviously lots of tools that have nothing to do with meds.
As money generating though.
Right, exactly. And I honestly and I talk about it on my own podcast, I'm like, I struggle with being on meds still, because I think I always have this, and I don't know if I've ever really said it like this, but I always have this thing where I'm like, well, I'm probably still not feeling as good as I could because I'm still taking a lot of meds. So I'm like, it's obviously keeping me stable, and I've needed meds for 15 years to sleep, but there's also side effects to what I'm taking. So there's always this thing where you're like, maybe my life would be better if I was off of all of this, and that's just something I think I just have to kind of continually talk about and, get help from professionals on and try to be healthy. I don't know if that makes sense. I think it's just, there are lots of stories of people who do get off medication and they end up doing okay, but the times I've tried to get off meds has ended me up, suicidal and what I talked about earlier. So there's a right way to do it. You never want to be like, all right, screw these side effects, I'm getting off everything. That's going to end in disaster, because it's you have to be careful with that. So
yeah, I go down this rabbit hole, but no, I want to hear about how you got here today.
Absolutely. Well, that 5-month period was 2013. So that was kind of a while ago. Definitely was the most life-changing time. I think really the biggest thing that I got out of that was moving towards a place of really trying to just take as much responsibility as possible for my decisions, and being like, okay, I do have bipolar. I do need medication, but meds is not going to fix my relationship with my dad. Meds is not going to give me a right view of masculinity and help me with culture and, and all of the above, right? Everything else that plays into just living life. And I think at a young age, I definitely had a lot of joy and a lot of the center of attention. I loved acting. I still think I could be an actor, and maybe it's just because I live in California, so everybody thinks that. I'm like, oh, the sets are Warner Brothers Studios right down the street. I should just try to, be an extra. I was in one thing for Christian television when I was 19. Got paid $400 to be the Apostle John in this made for TV thing. So I am a little bit famous, but no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I guess to kind of build on that 5 months just kind of set me in this direction of being wow, I really got to work on myself a little bit separate from just now I have meds that are kind of helping me stay stable. So whenever I share my story, with people, I'm always like the medication part was a pretty big percentage of it. It's like math, which I hate math. I'm bad at math, but I'm like, it's probably like 70% is the medication part, and then the other 30% is therapy and people and purpose. But I think the biggest thing that's also helped has just been talking about it. And the podcast was only 2 years ago, but before that, now for probably the last like 5 or 6 years, I've had the opportunity to speak a lot. And I got involved with a program called Courageous Minds, which was through the clinic that I go to in Pomona. And it was basically just to like, what's your story? What's happened to you? What have you done to like overcome? So I had the opportunity to speak in schools and to students. And then in the last couple of years, I've worked with NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have a couple different programs. One's called Ending the Silence. Another one's called In Our Own Voice. And it's just a presentation on like the story I just gave you, like what's happened, what helps me, and then kind of what's next for me. So I've done a lot of that. And I mean, recently, because of COVID, fortunately, we still get to do it. It's just all like online. So the speaking and then kind of mixed with the podcast has helped. And more recently, I've tried to be a little bit more into like therapy, because therapy is kind of not I haven't done it very consistently, but yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers. Those are just some of but I think the biggest thing that has helped, besides everything I've kind of already said, is just having community and friendships with people. So I don't know what that's like in your life, because everybody needs people, right? You're not going at it alone. But yeah, I've been tremendously blessed to have just the roommates that I live with are some of my closest friends. The job that I've had for the last 5 years, it's a small business, and we're all kind of brothers and close to each other. And I'm sure if I was working at some big corporation, I wouldn't feel that way.
You'd be surprised. I have a lot of friends I've collected from my corporate job, a lot. And I still am in touch with quite a few of them from even 15 years ago. So.
Yeah. But yeah, I think having people, and I think it's really important for as an exercise of our, especially the beginning of the year, kind of. I mean, I know we're already like flying through January, but yeah, I do think it's important to like, it's really helped me ask myself, kind of like when you talk to people and you're like, what do you want to do with your life? That's such a huge question. And a lot of times our answer is always like, it's like has to do with work. It's like, what is my job? And oftentimes your job and then what you're like passionate about are like a little bit separate, because sometimes you just, you work and it's not always what you exactly want to do. But I do think, especially with depression or any kind of addiction, you really like, I've really lost a lot of time and like energy that's been spent on losing my mind, and I think everybody has to deal with that, because I think oftentimes with addiction, there's always regret. And that's kind of part of the like 12 steps of, you need to go make amends with people and forgive. I do celebrate recovery too, which is basically just AA, but with like the Bible, created by this guy named John Baker, who's from California. So I do that too. And I'm like on the step of like, oh, I have a lot of people I need to forgive. But I do think it helps to like really try to find something that, gives you passion. You seem like a very passionate person, and that's probably why you do your podcast too, because you get a lot out of really, hearing other people's stories. And I haven't listened to every episode, but so far so good what I have heard about just,
Thank you.
If that makes sense. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It's all about, I liked my day job. Like before I quit it, I got to play with flowers and stuff. And I loved when I was helping the floral managers or when I could make an impact on the business. We got some new management in. I wasn't allowed to do that as much. But I also started on this journey, and the podcast is actually just step one of my master plan. Like I actually plan on building recovery playgrounds. That's how I'm going to help people. So I'm trying to figure out all the avenues to get the millions of dollars that I need to build these recovery playgrounds, because I want Denver, I want Kansas City, I want LA. Like those are some of my locations. I picture it being a chain across the country.
What is a recovery playground? I'm sure you've probably already talked about that on the show. So,
Well, I haven't shared much details.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't have to. It sounds cool.
No, it's okay. It's an idea that started back when I was married. I was married to a big kid, and I remember thinking for his 50th birthday, like I wanted to have a slip and slide and fun, like kid things, but no kids at the party. But we got divorced before he turned 50. So I didn't get to do that. And the girl he was dating at the time didn't throw him a 50th birthday party either, but which still pisses me off, as you can tell. But anyway, so then it snowballed. Anyway, I've never had kids intentionally.
Okay.
But I'm the person who's sitting on the airplane will have the kids screaming 2 seats over. Or if I'm trying to walk in the mall, they're zigging and zagging and whatever, or they're just busy. I'm not acclimated to the busy. It's kind of like my own version of a panic attack, really. Like the screaming you gave me and all that. Like I struggle with that. But if I was to ask you, Jared, where can you go for adult entertainment? I mean, with clothes on, adult entertainment, recreation, where there's no children, no gambling, and no alcohol. Where can you go? I've never asked this on the air before.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I guess I would say maybe to someone's house with friends that aren't doing those things.
Right.
But most of the time, I mean, I guess with COVID, it's been, I remember I was like at this birthday party for a friend in February, like before this all happened. And I'm like, yeah, that was I mean, I used to go to this brewery that unfortunately shut down. And I'm like, oh, wait, that party, there was alcohol. Okay, that doesn't count. The brewery we used to go and drink. Okay, that doesn't count. Lordsburg. Yeah, now I see why you're asking the question, because you have this passion to like create something that doesn't involve that stuff, you know?
Right.
So I can't really answer the question. So
the closest I've got is one person, and he was on Grant Cardone's team. He said a gym, which I agreed with him at the time when I thought of Planet Fitness. But then when I think about the why, that place is always crawling with freaking kids. They're everywhere. So
right.
We've had Zumba canceled so that the kids can hang out with Santa Claus. So I don't agree with the whole gym thing.
CrossFit would be a little bit more communal. I mean, or like, because I've worked out before too. And I'm like, my favorite thing to do is just go play hockey, because that's totally just an hour and a half of bros just being bros and you running into each other. Fortunately, I haven't been able to do that with COVID. And I'm like, I ran a marathon 2 years ago, but a lot of that was just me training by myself. So that wasn't really even community either. That was me, like me versus me, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I follow what you're saying. I think it's very interesting.
Well, I think of the alcoholics, for example.
Yeah.
If they want to be on a pool league or a dartboard league without having alcohol in their face, they don't have a place to go do that. Not that I know of. If you go to the casino, I mean, there's drinks. You can get away from maybe the kids, but there's still alcohol. There's still gambling, that kind of stuff. Bingo hall, whatever it is. I can't come up with the place. So the vision in my mind is all based on my recovery. So like I take pictures when I go for walks. Walking is one of my coping mechanisms. And I take pictures of all the flowers, because flowers are like in my blood. I imagine those pictures of the flowers are going to be in my recovery playgrounds. There'll be all kinds of activities. There'll be the dartboards and the pool tables. I want to have celebrations for clean time, as well as the birthdays and the anniversary. Like addicts don't have places to go other than 12-step or Celebrate Recovery, or, you know what I mean? As a general tool.
For sure.
So I want to create this stream of like this option, but it's going to have to do with how I got here. Like there's going to be a roller skating ring and an ice cream bar. And like, all my things are going to come to life and people can come and play. Like I want you to slide in to a ball pit. I want that to be the entrance. So it's going to be a playground.
That's awesome.
Recovery playground.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
I'll come. I love it.
Yeah. And then the back piece is the serving people is I don't know if halfway house is the right answer, but I want buildings on the property where people who need a clean start and need a roof over their head and a job will work on the property for me, but they'll live in this like halfway house where they'll have treatment, not formal like doctors, but they'll have to go to meetings. They'll have to do the things to kick off their life, and they'll have the opportunity. Because that's what most people need is just opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, whoever you surround yourself with, I know you like to integrate a quote into all your shows. I don't have a quote for you, unfortunately, but there's obviously so much about like, you know, you're the product of like the 5 people that you hang out with. I think I've heard that before. And maybe it's a Gary Vaynerchuk way of saying things, but like, yeah, the people you're around that's the behavior that's kind of going to follow. It's like, if I'm just around people who are negative, I'm going to walk away and feel like crap after talking to them, you know? And if I'm hanging out with people who just want to drink all the time and smoke and sit around and complain about the president, then, you know, so I follow. You got to be surrounded by, you know, good people and good influence. So it's ambitious. I like it.
Well, I'm working on it. That's why before we got on, it's like, yeah, 2020 was like fucking horrible. So much bad stuff happened, but it also helped me move the needle on this vision, you know, like, because it really started coming together in 2018. So I was really able to put things into action. So we'll see. That's a big goal. I want to be in my Kansas City location on my 50th birthday with enough funds to fly people in that I want to be there and to hire Blue October because they have come to all my openings, even though they don't know it yet.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because when I first heard your podcast, I was like, I know this song. I've like listened to this song before. And then the first thing I thought of was, how did you get permission to use this? And then you told the story, how you met them. But I was like, I just use Artlist and that's about it. So, but yeah, I made a video of my mental health story. Actually, it's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Beginning Again. At the end credits, I was trying to get permission to use this like Switchfoot song. Switchfoot's like a big Christian rock band. Anyway, I never got permission to use it, so I just did something else. So that's cool that maybe someday I'll get Switchfoot to be on my podcast.
Gotta buy a meet and greet and go, you know, bring your 16-year-old niece to better eyes.
That's so cool that you have that. It adds a lot to the because everybody uses instrumental stuff. That's the default, but to actually have like lyrics is pretty cool. So.
Well, we did get tripped up on YouTube because Justin didn't give me like written permission. Like I couldn't go through the label. Like I tried all that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You have to have like a license on.
So YouTube already yelled at my team about posting videos there. But anyway, I totally got us totally off course. So tell us how you're doing today. Tell us what like life looks like. You said that you're doing speaking engagements.
Mm-hmm. You know, things are okay. To be honest, from the time that I had gotten out of the hospital till about 2 years ago, I had about a 6-year streak of not being in the hospital. And then I kind of had some stuff happen. I was traveling a lot for my job. The job I've had for the last 5 years, we do virtual tours for businesses, like photography on like Google Maps. So it's like Google Street View. Probably seen like a virtual tour of like a house, you know, where you can like walk in. We do that, but we do it for like dealerships and businesses. So I used to travel. That's what I was telling you earlier, that I've been to New York and I've been to Albany shooting like virtual tours. And I was tremendously blessed and spoiled that I got to like travel and take pictures. And that was my job. But it wasn't exactly the best for my mental health either, because I was gone a lot and I slept all weird hours all the time. So I kind of hit a wall with that. And then anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not really answering your question how I'm doing now. Things are better, but yeah, I had a really hard time with COVID, and I was in and out of the hospital in March, May, June. I got a job working at like a mental health hospital. And I thought that was going to be something that I would maybe enjoy because I've been a patient myself. And then I was in a relationship and we broke up, and then I had that job, and then that job triggered my bipolar. Then I went into the hospital and I like tried some different medication that I kind of went against the advice of my outside doctor. And that triggered me into this like 3-month suicidal season from like May to August. So building up to say all of that I'm doing a lot better now. The speaking thing has helped, and I took about 6 months off of doing that. The podcast helped. Yeah, I'm really trying to just love myself, I think, is the biggest thing. And I definitely have had this tendency to be like really hard on myself about everything. Like, oh, I just like this feeling of like I'm not doing enough, or feeling like I'm failing. And I'm like, okay, I've survived suicide multiple times. I think I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, you're meant to be here. So.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a long answer. Sorry if that's a long answer to your question. I think now it's just kind of like what I was saying earlier, like taking as much responsibility as I can for me and for my thoughts, and trying to just be really grateful. I think gratitude's a huge thing. Like I encourage people to just, anytime you start getting down the path of like comparison and feeling like a failure and I'm not doing anything, to really just be like, okay, I have a job and I haven't lost my job, even though COVID is crazy and lots of people, our business got a small business loan and we might get another one. All right, well, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, sure, America's in debt, but we're getting money. I don't have a really good relationship with my dad. He moved to Florida. We don't really talk very much, but I'm really close with my mom. I see her every Sunday. We watch movies together. She feeds me really well. She's awesome. I don't see my sister a lot because she lives in Seattle, but I got to go for Thanksgiving and spend a week. She's got 3 boys. All right, I got to go travel during COVID, and my mom bought me a plane ticket, and I think it's just very easy to slip into like, so I'm trying to do that as much as possible, because there seems to be this tornado of like negativity that just comes sometimes. And it's like, whoa, I don't have it all figured out, but I do have a lot of things to really, really be grateful for. And I think that's a huge thing in recovery, to try to just have gratitude. And I'm sure you do that too. So
agreed, 100,000,000% for sure. So yeah. You're given some good nuggets here.
Absolutely.
If you were to say one thing, like COVID's not over, there's people out there that are like struggling, whether it's bipolar or those suicidal thoughts or those voices in our head that tell us we're not good enough that you mentioned. Like what would you direct them to do or suggest for them if you had someone in front of you asking, like, I'm feeling this way?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's helped me is the one thing that's like always for sure in life, whether it really has nothing to do with religion actually, or anything, like whether you say it's the universe or you think it's karma or you think it's Buddha or whatever, it's really more of just like a law. It's kind of like a law of gravity. Like that's one thing that we can't really argue against. It's like what goes up must come down, is the kind of the force of like things can change and will change. That's like a definite. So oftentimes our struggle with anything gets kind of worsened by the fact that we're like, this is just never going to change. Like my situation, the thoughts I'm having, the relationships I'm in, the job I'm in, all of that stuff is like circumstantial, and it's like it's gonna get better and change without you even doing anything necessarily, right? But I do think we can kind of back to the whole like try to just control what you can control. And even if you're in a state of like suicidal thoughts and despair, where you're just like, oh, there's no way out of this. And oftentimes you just feel like there's no way out of the thought, right? It's like just the thought's not going away. Your mind cannot stay in the same place forever. And I just went through this again. Like I thought I was never going to go through this again, but I just went through it again for 3 months from like May to August. I was having like suicidal thoughts like all day, every day. And I was like, all right, well, I've been through this before, but then the last time I went through this, I almost died. I'm not going to try that again. But I was very close to like, it felt like a real thing. And I was like, oh, I thought I was never going to go through this again. And it was really hard. And then literally just one day, it just stopped. You know, the storm just like, it's like in the movie when the boat is like in, like up against the storm, right? And then it's just eventually like it calms and like the sun comes out and you're, you know, laying on the boat or whatever. Yeah. I don't know if that does that. I don't know if that helps. It's all of this is a little bit easier said than done. Like when you're actually in it, it's just very hard to embrace the fact that like you can't stay in the same place forever. And I've listened to so many people's stories and books, and everybody says that. They're like, I thought I was going to stay this way forever. And then eventually one day I just got a little bit better and it went away, you know, and try to just control what you can control as much as possible, which is your thoughts. You know?
I wish I had you 2 days ago. That's what the daily reading was about 2 days ago. Was like,
oh, yeah?
Go past. Yeah, I should have looked it up while you were talking, but it was literally what all things pass is the first line out of the reading. Patient attains all that it strives for. It talks about, you just did an eloquent job, so I don't even need to tell you anymore. You just did it very well.
Yeah, I started listening to it, and then I found it, Oscar Morris. Oh, was it from Oscar Morris? Sobriety is its own reward and then some?
No.
Oh, never mind. Okay, this is something else. I was trying to look up what you were talking about.
Oh, this is out of my little book. So I do a daily reading book every day.
Oh, never mind. Okay, different thing.
Yeah, and then I download. So is there anything that I forgot to ask or you forgot to mention that we want to address before we sign off?
Man, we just talked about a lot of good stuff. I'm really just honored that you just asked me to do this, and I really hope people get something out of this. I just love the opportunity to share and be honest, and I hope, you know, people can really just make it through whatever they're going through. I know it's before COVID, people probably were struggling, and during COVID, yeah, I feel like I kind of covered everything that's, you know, made me me, and I'm still learning, and I would love for people to find me on Facebook, Jared Diehl, or type in Louder Now Podcast, Facebook page, message me there. You can email me, loudernow88@gmail.com. Kind of like what you said, you don't know everybody who's listening. So you're like, I know people are listening because I see the numbers, but I don't know. I know it's more than just my mom, you know, and yeah, I would love to just connect with people and try to just be of support to whatever. I'm not a doctor, but, you know, I have my own experience. I'm sure you experience that too. You're not a doctor, but you're like, I've been through a lot, so I can try to help.
Yeah.
People want friends, you know, people want community and connection. And
we'll make sure that all your links are in the show notes, nice and handy. Yeah. Once I get my web mess, you'll live on my website too. So, of
course. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for just creating this podcast and creating this space. And I personally don't have much experience with gambling. I used to try to play poker in high school and I sucked at it. And I was so ADD. I was like the first to lose with my friends. Every Friday night we play, and I'm like, I hate this. I hate gambling, but just I know there's still a huge need for that, because it's a real thing. I appreciate you just, like pressing ahead and, working on these episodes and getting it out there, and like, that's awesome. So I just really respect you for that, and that's great. So,
well, thank you. You're doing the same thing. It's all about raising awareness so people don't have to have this shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy posting on the Facebook page and then getting like 100 comments of people like, I'm talking about this. I'm talking about this. I want to talk about this. And I'm just like, whoa, this is a huge subject, and we all need to just I'd like to write a book someday. It's really a slow process. I have a little bit I've been a writer naturally like my whole life, but I would like to put a book out there and get my story out there. And are you a writer?
Yeah, I have 3.
3 books?
Well, they're not published yet. So
oh, okay.
No, but there's definitely 3 coming. One we're co-authoring. There's 12 or 13 of us women that met online this year that we're writing series. Like we've decided we're going to be the next Chicken Soup for the Soul. I started one that I didn't finish that was about healing from the guy that like shattered my world, but he also taught me more than I could ever imagine. But then now I'm like friends with him, and like it helped me start the healing, and I got to healing. So now I don't know how to finish it actually. And then I wrote one about my VA business because people need to understand how to hire VAs too.
Well, what is it?
A virtual assistant. I'm sorry, a virtual assistant.
Virtual assistant. Okay, I thought you meant Veterans Affairs or something. So
yeah, it trips me up when I get their emails. They're spam emails all the time. But all right, Jared. Well, thank you so much for being here. And
thank you again. It was truly an honor and just such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.